I have been making a huge LEGO Smaug from the Hobbit, and in the last episode I made his arms/wings. But there is still a lot to be done, and in this video I will be finishing his torso and his back legs. And with that, let's get into it. To start things off, I made the armor plating for his back. And it was important to have a more narrow section of scales near the front so I could have room to build his back muscles that would go to his shoulders later. And then the many spikes can be placed along his back, with them getting gradually larger the further down. And with this empty section in the middle, I need to make 3 larger spikes. And to do that, I took these 1x2 ratchet plates and the 4x16 triple curved brick and connected them to this assembly that I covered with more curved brick so that it had a nice flow to it. Then I replicate that 2 more times with the exception of one being smaller. And now these can be placed down to finish his back. After that, the whole assembly can get placed on his torso. Because I overlapped plates to make the scaling down his back, I used these hinge bricks to compensate for the gradual incline that it would otherwise have. Once it's placed down, the handle I made can get disguised as another spike. For the next part, I needed the arms and the neck back on the body so I could seal those connection points. Starting with finishing the neck that will gradually go down to his chest. And then continuing down his chest, I can work my way up to sealing his shoulder. With this arm sealed, the other one is done likewise with some minor changes to compensate for the difference in arm position. And now I can make the muscles that will run from his shoulders to his upper back, again making them slightly different to match the arm positions. For the front section of his neck and chest, I wanted to do something a little different. I made a hollow place in the middle of these sections so I could place these 3x3 orange lights. After running the wires out, I took these white plates and covered them with the medium nougat tiles and plates and offset them so that when you turn the lights on, it gives a slight glow between the scales. And if you're into lighting up your builds like me, I would highly recommend Light My Brick, which is what I use. Their wires hardly raise the bricks at all because they're flat, and they have a lot of options, from flicker effects to even remote controlled. Alright, and with the front sealed, he needs to be disassembled so I can move on to the rest of his torso. I'll start with making a defining line to indicate the change from his chest to his ribs. Then I'll begin filling in the front of his chest. Except one spot on his left breast where he has that iconic missing scale. And then I'll fill in the rest of his ribs on the side, again making a defining line to transition from his ribs to his stomach. And underneath, I can fill out the rest of his chest and his ribs. After that, the sides of his stomach can be filled in. And then underneath, I can tuck in his ribs and fill in his underbelly. But before I get to his legs, it's time to deal with that 10-pound weight that's propped him up. The idea is to replace it with a broken pillar that he's kind of crawling over. So I figured out how tall it needed to be, and I came up with this. But this won't be the final design. In fact, it's probably going to change quite a bit, but this will act as a very good reference for now. With most of his torso done, I'll set him up again and attach the webbing that goes from his elbow to his hip, so that way I can get an idea of any gaps along his torso that would need to be filled in later. Once his arms are pinned, I'll tuck in the rest of the fabric under his back plating, and then I'll cut out the design for the webbing. And with that done, we can finally move on to building his back legs. First, I need to make the structure his legs will be built onto. For both legs, I'll put them on an angle with this 45-degree plate, just like I did with his arm, to give it a more dynamic look. And with the base structure done, I can move on to building the exterior of his leg. It was important that his scales be much darker leading to the top of his legs, just like the rest of his body, with big dark scales on top going to much lighter and smaller scales underneath. Kinda like what you would see on a crocodile or an alligator, but a bit more dramatic. And with his upper leg done, we can move on to the midsection. Keeping his shins a dark brown, I can then move on to building the sides of his calf muscles. Then making the connection point for his ankle to go to. Then finishing out the back of his leg. With this section done, I can attach it to his knee and then slot it into his thigh. Then I can move on to the last portions of his leg and foot. With this part here kind of acting as a transition from his foot to his ankle. Now the palm of his feet are much smaller than his hands and have the appropriate number of digits, unlike his 6 fingers in the front. I had a few people comment in the last video that I should use tires to fill in the gaps between his fingers, and I was able to do so on some of them, but I found it worked really well for the front 3 toes because they didn't need to move that much. So thank you guys for the suggestions. And now that all the sections of his legs are complete, they can be put together. And then slotted into the torso. And now, to get rid of that weight, I'm going to extend his tail connection point, since his legs can't actually support him. The way I built this is almost exactly how I built his torso, using Technic lift arms in between the layers so they can't pull each other apart. And now, for the moment of truth. Will it work? Of course it works. And now that the tail is supporting the legs, I can finish sealing up the back end. With both back legs sealed, the torso is complete. And it's time to see what he's looking like. The full enormity of Smaug is almost realized. All that is left is his tail. Keep in mind though, that at this scale, his tail will be about 9 feet long, and I still have to put him in the treasure hoard in Erebor. So subscribe if you don't want to miss out. And keep those ideas coming about what you would like to see in his treasure hoard. There were quite a few suggestions in the last video that I had never thought of. Alright, until next time, have a good one, and I'll see you then.